I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
No one who was testifying today.
Oh, he's a jip.
Well, we're here this evening, once again, for the final list of applicants to be interviewed in the first round for the Jefferson County Development Authority. We have a total of 4 people tonight who are going to be interviewed. I'm a little early, actually. I was thinking we were starting at 6:15. Are you ready? Is everyone ready? Are you expecting anyone else? No? Okay. Are you?
Quick thing, Mr. President.
How did we know?
Can we have some clarification on the application process? Because certain names on here seem to have appeared at a later date, and I think some community members wanted some clarification as to how the application process went about. I remember you mentioning that they would be open until the
Yeah.
positions would be filled, just so we have clarification for everybody.
So our policy allows that. Our policy states that someone can apply up to the Monday before the meeting where the appointments are made. So as long as the public has 2 days' notice before they're appointed of who has applied, it's permitted under our appointment policy.
I guess to that, how would they be interviewed then? If they applied up to the Monday before the meeting?
So typically, the policy is written for a Thursday meeting. So we can receive actually, you can receive applications after the Monday too, now that I think about it. The policy is written on our website.
And interview them that Thursday at the meeting?
Yes.
If need be? Okay.
Yes. So, we could get it, the deadline is typically Monday at noon before a Thursday meeting. However, the policy states that people can apply after that, and if we receive applications after that, the commission can consider them as long as we don't make an appointment 2 days before, or without the public having 2 days' notice that people have applied. However, if we really need to fill the vacancy and we only have one person, even you can waive the 2-day notice requirement. And that's a policy. We made up all of these rules because there are no rules provided in the statute for political appointments, but we created a policy to try to provide some order to the process.
I guess the anticipated date of appointment, so everybody's clear on that, when do we think that could occur? So now individuals that perhaps still want to apply understand that when the cutoff would be? I guess, is there an anticipated?
So I think for now, it would be cut off because we've already started interviewing.
I guess that's
because we
where
talked
the
about a
problem
second
is.
round.
That's where the problem is what I'm trying to figure out. Because a lot of people have been asking me, and I think we need to provide some sort of clarification here. So if the cutoff is a Monday, is it already been cut off, or what?
The policy says what it says.
You have till the Monday before the meeting,
I
essentially.
think so, and then we would interview them on that Thursday, the Thursday of the meeting.
If you wanted to
That's how we've
follow the
always
strict letter
done.
of the policy, they would
Yeah.
have until Monday or even
Yeah,
later if you
even
wanted.
later.
If you could provide 2 days of notice to the public.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
I would assume in this instance you wouldn't waive the 2-day requirement since we've had so many applicants and it's been open for so long.
Okay, I just want to make sure everybody's on the same page here, so.
And it's on our website under the county commission policies and has been for several years.
All right, that was a good question, Josh.
Well, let me follow that up a little bit. We've had a couple, not too many, but a couple people not show up for the interview. Are they, if they call you the day or the Monday before our next meeting, are we going to?
So the policy does not require an interview. And we never have. And what we've been telling people for this appointment and for any other appointment is that, as of late, the commission has shown a strong preference for candidates who do interview, but the policy is clear that an interview is not required. So, while we we make an effort to set up an interview with every candidate, if there's someone who wanted to come in, interview because they missed this, I'm sure we could arrange that, but it's not required to interview to make an appointment.
All right, and I did see that a few people had withdrawn Now, was that done officially, or is that just people who just,
I think when people tell us that they're withdrawing, we ask for something in writing. So anyone who's withdrawn, I think we have something like either an email or typically they withdraw in writing.
and they would not be considered?
That's correct.
But people who, like the gentleman did show up last night, he still could be considered until he put a letter into withdrawal.
Right.
Okay.
Right. I mean, you could, if there's someone who you didn't interview and you said, okay, I really like this person, I want to appoint them, you could. And until we hear otherwise, we don't know that they're not interested in serving if they've, you know, given us an application and not told us otherwise.
Okay, any other questions? All right, ready to move on? Okay, the first person on the list to interview this evening is Christy Huddle. So you can come on up to the chair, to the table, and pull the microphone toward you so that you can be heard by the masses, okay? And I'm going to start, I have a couple of questions for you, and I'm going to start the process here. So I'm going to read to you paragraph 15 of the lawsuit that Rockwell filed with regard to the pilot agreement. And I'm going to read paragraph 15, and I want you to tell me whether or not you believe that paragraph is fact.
How would I know?
I'm going to read this to you. It's just your opinion.
Do you want opinion, or you want me to say whether or not it's factual?
I want your opinion as to whether or not you believe
Okay.
it's factual.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, it says, upon information and belief, if Rockwell is permitted to operate at the site, the facility will generate noxious air and water emissions, will produce unsightly sounds, odors, lighting, etc., and will create significant truck traffic to and from the site, all of which will diminish the quality of life and threaten the health and safety of the plaintiff and of JCV members and their children. So do you believe that's factual?
I just don't have enough information to be able to tell you that.
Okay. All right. And this next one has to do with executive sessions. The law recognizes the need of executive sessions to preserve the confidentiality of certain privileged and sensitive topics, including conversations that are attorney-client privileged. To ensure compliance with the law and your legal obligations to the JCDA, all members should refrain from disclosing any confidential information discussed during executive session to any party outside the JCDA. And are you familiar with executive sessions?
I was on the County Board of Zoning Appeals for 11 years, so yes, I am.
You're familiar with that? Okay. All right. And so do you believe that, do you agree with that statement? Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
A couple more here. And this has to do with duties of a fiduciary, a board member as a fiduciary member of a board. And this was written actually by one of the lawyers that sent this letter to the JCDA. States have recognized that the members of nonprofit boards at a minimum owe a fiduciary duty to the entity they govern, and this fiduciary duty includes a duty of care, of loyalty, and a duty of obedience. The duty of care can be rather broad, but it is at its heart a duty to perform due diligence and to protect the assets of the entity. The duty of loyalty means that the directors must put the interest of the entity above their own personal interests at all times. The duty of obedience means that the directors must ensure that the entity does not engage in illegal or unauthorized activities and fulfills its obligations. And that's what the lawyer wrote with regard to fiduciary responsibilities of a board member. Do you understand that?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And if appointed to the JCDA, will you agree to uphold the contracts and agreements that are currently in place, which were put in place by board members prior to your appointment?
Provided they were put in place legally, yes.
Okay, and how would you know if they were legally put in place?
Oh, we'd have to look into that, wouldn't we?
Yeah. Will you agree to follow the advice of the lawyer for the JCDA, even if you do not agree with that advice?
Again, if I think the lawyer's making a mistake, then I would want to point that out.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And I say that from my own experience on working with lawyers. I do everything pro se now because of that.
Okay, all right, thank you. And we'll start with Commissioner Compton, and he'll
I'll
have
start with
questions.
Commissioner Tab this time. I want to be fair here, I know.
I can.
I'll defer to her then, since I took it yesterday.
All right, you want to be last?
That's fine.
Okay, Jane, would you go next?
Well, Josh, you had complained during the first round that all the questions had been asked, so I thought it was good to start
Patsy
with
takes them
you.
all anyway, so it doesn't really
Okay.
matter.
Right. Thank you for applying, Christy, and for your past service on the Board of Zoning Appeals. I know that's can be a really tough position.
Fun.
Sometimes.
Yeah, there are occasions when sometimes, yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
As you know, the reconstituted JCDA board is going to be a 12-member board. We've reduced the size. What skills, expertise, or experiences would you bring to the table to facilitate working with your peers on the board?
City planner for 30 years, and in that capacity, I worked with pretty much all the departments in Montgomery County when I was there, even though I wasn't really assigned to work with all the departments. I did that as a matter of course because I wanted to help all the departments. And I got a reputation for being very helpful and knowledgeable on pretty much all subjects. Be modest.
Is that all? Okay. Caleb?
If you could bring any kind of development to the county, what kind of economic development would you bring?
I moved here in 1990, and I ride a motorcycle. And one of the things I love about this county is how beautiful it is. And another thing I like about what state of West Virginia is how beautiful it is. And I've ridden my motorcycle all over West Virginia and all over the country too. But this state has, and this county, the county less so because everybody knows about the county, but this state has unbelievable treasures that have not been publicized enough. When I on my travels, I remember being at the entrance to a state park in Indiana, a brand new state park, and I said, you really have to go to West Virginia because the state parks there are better than any state park system that I've come across in the country, which is saying something. But I would like to see that, because I think that West Virginia and Jefferson County, that we already have these enormous assets, the National Park, the C&O Canal, even though it's on the other side, a lot of people come from this side to do it. The farmland that's been protected, the mountains that are here. I would love to see that asset protected and worked on. I don't think we do nearly enough to draw tourists here that would enjoy the things that we already have. And I would hate to see a development occur that doesn't build on that and discourages tourism, because I think that is our biggest asset. I think we're incredibly privileged, and I say that from having traveled all over the U.S.
You're on the Board of Zoning Appeals, so you probably know what that future land use guide up there is. And I noticed, and one of the other people who interviewed tonight mentioned in his resume some of the written information on that. Are you familiar with all that that has to do with how people wanted their county to be developed?
Yes.
All right. And you indicated Montgomery County. Now, I'm somewhat familiar with Montgomery County. I used to run around there quite a bit. But I'm not sure I'm familiar with their industrial parks, if they have any in Montgomery County.
I don't think they have any heavy industrial parks.
Okay. I didn't know if you were involved in that part.
Well, wait, Dickerson, the waste treatment plant that the county put in is, I would consider heavy industry. Yeah, that would be considered heavy industry.
And I was wondering if you were any boards or as part of your job in Montgomery County or in California, which had dealings with commercial parks or industrial parks for any of the cities or counties.
Business parks, yes, in Montgomery County. In California, the the city I worked in, unfortunately, did not address that well enough. They had Mare Island Naval Shipyard, which once that closed, they were in deep trouble and went bankrupt. I was not in the city at the time. The business park that we had created the land for, the city council allowed developers to come in and put in housing, which was not in a, they changed the comprehensive plan to allow it.
And which part of Jefferson County do you live in?
Harper's Ferry, in the town,
You do live in the town?
in the corporate limits.
Maybe I give them.
I'm on the Water Commission too, for which one of the other things that I'm concerned about is protecting the water. That's our source water.
Well, we're just
Right.
looking at each other. We're having a little trouble getting representatives from some of the cities. That's not your problem per se, but just an issue.
We currently have a representative from Harper's Ferry, but I believe her appointment is expiring in April, so.
And then the last question I have is what type of motorcycle?
What kind of motorcycle?
Yes.
Kawasaki Concourse 05. You familiar with it? C10? Do you ride?
I have a,
Can't help it.
in my shed, I have a Honda and a Yamaha. They're 30 years old. I occasionally take them out and ride them. Not as often as I used to. So Kawasaki's cousins of those.
I used to ride Hondas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, my husband bought a Kawasaki this past year, so we ride together.
All right. All right.
That's all the questions I
Okay.
have.
Thank you very much.
And
Actually, I'm
Wait,
still
wait,
don't
wait, can't-
See, I told you to forget me. I want a motorcycle, but I don't want to have that argument with my wife, so I don't have one.
Oh, well,
But
okay.
other than that, so I'm actually from Montgomery County, Maryland. So I grew up
Okay.
there for like 25 years probably, and I was one of the fortunate ones to escape that place.
Uh-huh.
But they have a very diverse economy down there. So I understand, I think everybody agrees with you probably we should focus on tourism,
Mm-hmm.
but I think we also need a diverse economy to support everything. We can't support it entirely on tourism,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately. If we had a major national park like Zion or something, perhaps. But I think, are you open to some light industrial? I'm not talking about absolute heavy industrial, more like light industrial like we currently have, maybe more of those folks?
Well, I'm totally familiar with the Burr Industrial Park because we granted a lot of variances in that park. So I'm really familiar with the industry that's in there, and that appears to be light industry. But I think what we should worry about is if we create heavy industry that does not make you want to go to the area because you're seeing that being, seeing this big smokestacks and spewing stuff into the air. You assume that it is because they would be tall to do that legally. It sort of would tell me that, whoa, I think I'll go someplace else where I know that it's not being.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's going to push for complete heavy industry everywhere. I think, like, just Montgomery County, I think they've done a lot of things incorrectly also. I mean, they have very nice parks
Oh, yeah.
there, but you go right outside it and you're stacked on top of each other with communities on top of each other
Mm-hmm.
left and right, and you feel congested. So I don't think we want that either here, so.
Some people actually choose that. They do. But some people like to live in New York City and Paris. I mean, they choose that. So that's fine. I mean, I don't have a problem with that. But I think the most unfortunate thing that's happened in this county is when Ranson was going through the process and they had the federal money to do the comprehensive plan and then come up with a brand new type of zoning ordinance, I thought, wow, this is incredible. Ranson. I was really blown away. And then to watch, to watch this total change without the same citizen input that occurred when that comprehensive plan was made, I thought it was really a shame because as a planner, my master's thesis was on how to get the citizens involved, and one of the ways is you get them educated, you get them involved like that, but then to turn around and make a decision that's not at all in conformance with what they talked about, met, approved in a fairly rapid fashion. I mean, I think that was a real shame.
This all goes back to Ranson being a municipality and home rule and having their own board of zoning, et cetera, and whatnot, so.
Right, I
It may
agree.
have been maybe slightly different if the county was part of that, I don't know.
The
But
county was
Branson,
part of that because
yeah,
it approved
well,
the
Not
annexation there.
specifically to
yeah.
rezone anything at all,
It was
No?
a minister, I mean, we were required to.
Oh, we're required to,
Yeah.
okay, because it was, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So, yeah, those
Yeah.
stipulations occurred unfortunately, but.
yeah, yeah.
I guess, is there anything else you'd like to fix at the JCDA that you think's going
Fix.
incorrectly? Fix or could improve on, or think needs to be improved on?
You know, I understand when you're bringing it, you know, when you're bringing businesses in, there's a certain, it's not a case of being able to advertise who all is interested in coming in, because you can, one, it can raise property values in the location where they might want to situate, that sort of thing. But to the best of the ability of the JCDA, to be able to keep things really open, so that people don't feel like that something's being slipped past them. I mean, because that really creates distrust with the government, and I don't like seeing that. I don't like seeing that. When I was on the Board of Zoning Appeals, we were really good at trying to make everything really open, except for the fact we had way too many executive sessions. We were allowed to have way too many executive sessions. I'd like seeing where the process doesn't, it appears, the people that are there know what's going on at the meetings. And they don't see something and appear that, boom, it happened somewhere else and it's all decided and then it, you know, I don't like seeing that.
That's all I have. Thanks.
Okay, is there anything you'd like to close with?
No, that's it. Thank you for having me.
All right, thank you for your interest.
Okay, bye.
All right, the next candidate is Sheila Vertino. Come to the table, please. And you can just pull that microphone toward you. Yeah? Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask you that you're welcome. Thank you for coming. Tell us about yourself and why you want to be on the Board of Zoning, not Board of Zoning Appeals, JCDA.
Okay.
And I think I forgot to ask
Oh.
Ms. Huddle that, but go ahead.
Okay. My name is Sheila Vertino. We live in Steamboat Run, which is in Shepherdstown, but outside the corporate limits. And we moved here 8 years ago from Fairfax County. We moved here intentionally. And by that I mean we moved here for the quality of life. We didn't move for a job or to be near family. We chose Jefferson County. My background, probably my career, the last 16 years are the things that would be most interest to you and to the discussion. I was Vice President for Information and Research at a trade association that represented commercial real estate developers. And that was North American based, so Canada, US, and Mexico. And these people developed all different types of properties. So it was office, it was commercial, could be industrial, could be mixed use, could be some retail. They got into then adaptive reuse, niche development, things like that. My job there was to be identifying and tracking megatrends. And what I was trying to figure out was, and to do that, I would do research projects. Some of them would be primary research. Others, I would manage a research company. I hired futurists. And we were looking into the future. And the idea was, because commercial real estate developers live in the future, they need to know years before anybody else what's going on. So I would be the one who was trying to figure out what kinds of industries were poised to grow, and where were they going to want to locate facilities, where were areas going to grow, and then what kinds of site selection would they be involved with, and then what kind of facility would they need. So the whole range of that, was part of my job there. So I brought some things to show you today. And this, I was also editor-in-chief of the magazine. I ran the think tank and was in charge of the Distinguished Fellows. So these are some magazine copies that, and I can leave these with you if you like, but this one is about U.S. manufacturing and industrial space. This one's about office development in mixed-use properties, next-generation corporate offices, and those are just the lead stories in there. And then there was a series of these things about for example, the distribution and fulfillment centers of the future, alternative niche developments of the future, looking to 2030. So, and this is about interior design and build out. So I also am really proud of this book that I published because the developers were in urban areas, suburban areas, but also rural areas. And so this was a book that I managed the publication of, and it talks about how to develop in what this guy calls ag-urbs. So it was agricultural areas that, in his personal case, he had 5 industries in his town, and they all left in 1 year. And he was in Effingham, Illinois, which is not near Chicago. So he came up with these ideas, and that's what the book's about. And then I also managed to get it printed in China. So very proud of that. So that's my background. The other thing that I bring to the process is I was on the board of trustees for Mount St. Mary's University, and they had 2,400 acres that were undeveloped in their property. Difficult. So, for example, they had this mountainside behind, which is so beautiful there, but what are you going to do with it? We decided that would be a good area, and here I was advising them. So that would be a good area to do harvesting of selected hardwoods, to make it a more sustainable property there. We also, they had areas where we were able to sell mitigation banking rights to other developers who needed that kind of trade. I don't know if you're familiar with that, how that works, but sometimes you can take a property and trade rights for things like that, and it's called mitigation banking. And then the third thing you might have actually seen, and that is on the east side of campus, I think it's 220,000 solar panel farm. It was property that had been tenant farmed, and it didn't fit with the rest of the university. So instead, I suggested this to them, and they pursued it and had it built with Constellation Energy, was the one that developed it and is now powering the university, which moved them away from coal. So those are two main areas of expertise, I guess, that I would bring.
Okay, thank you. I have a few questions. You may have heard them as you were sitting back there. The first one has to do with and it's actually a part of a paragraph in a lawsuit that Jefferson County Vision filed against the Development Authority and the other agencies within the county with regard to the pilot agreement. Okay, now, I'm going to read you paragraph 15, and I'll ask you the question at the end. It says, upon information and belief, if Rockwell is permitted to operate at the site, the facility will generate noxious air and water emissions, will produce unsightly sounds, odors, lighting, etc., and will create significant truck traffic to and from the site, all of which will diminish the quality of life and threaten the health and safety of the plaintiff and of Jefferson County Vision members and their children. Do you believe that sentence is factual?
I'd like to answer that in 2 parts. I think the first part of that statement about the emissions and the basically truck traffic and water effluents, that type of thing, I do believe is true because Rockwell said it was. They filed their own reports and the things are there. I think the thing hasn't been decided yet is the second part, and that is whether those things are going to affect our health. So, the DEP says, they're in range. If you look at those numbers, you're like, really? So that's the part, that's why I have a 2-part answer to that question. It's the best I can do.
Right, that's fine, thank
Okay.
you. Yeah. In a letter to from one of the attorneys to the Jefferson County Development Authority, there's a last paragraph in here regarding executive session. And it states, "The law recognizes the need of executive sessions to preserve the confidentiality of certain privileged and sensitive topics, including conversations, excuse me, that are attorney-client privileged. To ensure compliance with the law and your legal obligations to the JCDA, all members should refrain from disclosing any confidential information discussed during executive session to any party outside the JCDA." Do you believe that to be accurate?
Served on numerous boards, and I've also reported to boards, and I've always supported the confidentiality of the board, and I agree with that statement.
Okay, thank you. In another letter from another lawyer to the JCDA, it states that states have recognized, and to me, this is probably one of the most important things that a board member has a responsibility for, and it has to do with fiduciary responsibility. States have recognized that the members of nonprofit boards at a minimum owe a fiduciary duty to the entity they govern, and this fiduciary duty includes a duty of care, a duty of loyalty, and a duty of obedience. The duty of care can be rather broad, but at its heart, it's a duty to perform due diligence and to protect the assets of the entity. The duty of loyalty means that the directors must put the interest of the entity above their own personal interests at all times. The duty of obedience means that the directors must ensure that the entity does not engage in illegal or unauthorized activities and fulfills its obligations. Do you understand, as a board member, that would be a responsibility?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I do have a question about the fiduciary responsibility of the board. I did talk to, or I sent an email, both to you, Mr. Hudson, but also to Mr. Deal, and I asked him about the fiduciary responsibility. He talked to me about that, and so I understand that completely. In my question to him, I also asked him about the legal exposure and what, how does that, how are members protected or not protected? Is there any exposure, legal exposure?
Well, there, according to this letter, there possibly could be. And so this letter, and I'll tell you what this letter states. It says, and this is from the attorney to the JCDA. It states, "Although it's impossible to state with certainty, in the event that the JCDA willfully breaches its obligations under the Memorandum of Understanding, MOU, which breach results in heavy money damages being assessed against the JCDA, it is a significant possibility that a court could determine that the individual board members who voted to breach the MOU are personally liable for those damages." So that's what the lawyer says about that. Okay? All right.
I think that's open for interpretation, but go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's,
Well,
that's why the
legal
courts are
stuff,
full of
yeah.
lawsuits.
Yes.
Question number 4, if appointed to the JCDA, will you agree to uphold the contracts and agreements that are currently in place, which were put in place by board members prior to your appointment?
I don't know how to answer that question because it's a hypothetical. I haven't
No,
seen
it's
the
actually
contracts.
not. It's really not hypothetical, because there are contracts that are in place
Okay.
at the JCDA, along with agreements, and it's typical for that to happen with the development authorities because of the businesses that are potentially going to be coming here. So it's not hypothetical because it does exist.
Yeah, I guess hypothetical is the wrong word. My concern is I don't know what they are, so I don't know how to answer the question. You're asking me to say I would support these documents that have legal basis, but I don't know what they are because I haven't seen them. So assuming that they were legally executed, I would support them.
Okay, thank you. And the final question that I have for you, Will you agree to follow the advice of the lawyer for the JCDA, even if you do not agree with that advice?
On that matter, I think that, like I told you, I've been on boards and I've had lawyers advise us, and I think that is their role. They advise. Going back to the duty of care, it's the responsibility of the board to listen to that advice, debate that advice, and reach consensus with the board. That's their responsibility.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right. Jane?
Yes, well, thank you for coming in, and I've been most interested in your answers. I feel that you've given a great deal of thought, and you've got a great deal of experience being on boards and dealing with legal issues. Well, you've been on boards and you've managed boards. We've reorganized the JCDA board from like 20-member board down to 12.
15, I think it's 15.
15,
I'm sorry, I did say that
That's
previously.
manageable. I mean, I was on one that had 60. That's not good.
No, well, I even think 20 is too much, but, which is one reason why we're down in numbers. But, you know, we're a relatively small county, and I think you just need to have a good working relationship. You really told us a lot about your experience, but can you tell any personal traits or any methodology you have for working with fellow board members?
I currently serve on the grant review committee for WISH, for Women Investing in Shepherd. And
Served on that,
that's
too.
right. So you know what I'm going to say.
Yeah, go ahead, I'm sorry.
What happens is, last year, for example, we got 60 proposals. And the work of this group is to take those 60 proposals, review them, winnow them down, go out and do site visits and winnow it down. And then you have to choose, and here I'm talking a group of 20 women, has to choose 4.
Right.
And people are very invested, very emotional, very passionate about their choices, and they want to make the best case. And it can be it can be challenging. So last year, I felt we were down to 4, but there was one more that was on the bubble. And I really felt strongly that it was a good contender, and it was in Sharpsburg. And the idea was that we were supposed to, the WISH area of care is 9 counties. But to date, we've only given awards to the Eastern Panhandle. So each year, you know, people from Frederick County, Maryland, and Virginia, and from Sharpsburg, whatever, they put in their proposals, but they never get an award. They don't even get to the finals. And so I said, well, I think we should expand it. Instead of having 4 choices, I think we should have 5. Well, it was late in the evening, and people were tired, and they didn't really want to go and open it back up again. And so I could see that. And even though I felt that my position had validity, I demurred. I just said, okay, that's fine, because I wanted the cohesiveness of the group. I wanted to maintain that because it was important for the group going forward next year to want to come back. They didn't want a divisive, angry experience. So, I mean, that's an example of me working on a board and dealing with a difficult situation.
What kind of economic development would you like to see in the county?
I would really like to see, first of all, I don't think there's any reason why we can't go toe-to-toe with Loudoun County. We have what they have and more. So I think that we should be developing knowledge-based industries. I think we could expand our agricultural industries to develop more kind of emerging products. And I think also tourism with regard to experiences, because experiences are big right now. So I'd say those 3 things. I think light industry is fine. When I was doing this research, there was a lot of research that showed the logistics that was kind of the new manufacturing. That was the industry that was going to grow. Now, you might say there's not that many people employed in distribution facilities, but the truth is there aren't that many people employed in new manufacturing facilities either. So, but I think I'm pro-growth, but I'm pro-smart growth. So I believe that development isn't a bad word. Develop means to make something better.
Thank you.
Okay.
I should point out, I think my wife belongs to WISH too, I believe.
Oh, good, okay.
I pointed out to the others that I've interviewed about the land use guide for the comprehensive plan. Are you familiar with that?
I am. I actually have a copy of it, and have read. Haven't read the spots off it, but I know the gist of it. I'm quite familiar with the concept of comprehensive planning.
Now, it's been pointed out that it's not a statute, it's not a law, but it is at one time when they did the study, it was the wish of the county. That's the way we go. What do you do on that?
It's unfortunate. I wish that the dog had teeth. But, that's where the zoning comes in, and the ordinances interpret that into law. So, I think there's a process in place. One thing, when I was thinking about the comprehensive plan, it made me think that it's a one-dimensional thing. It's a map, so it's flat. And right now, some of the issues we're dealing with are, air and water related. And so we need something that's more three-dimensional instead of something that results in a map.
I think you've answered most of my other questions by your presentation. Do you have one wish for the county?
My wish for the county is kind of existential, I think. And by that I mean, I would like our vision to be on abundance. And sometimes I feel that we are focused on lack, like you have to kind of hold on to things and there's not enough for everybody. And I just think people need to kind of lift their heads up and get a real positive feel for all that we have here and see the abundance and then kind of relax and rejoice in it.
Thank you.
Okay.
You guys took them all, for God's sakes. No, but okay, so just your strengths. Okay, so I honestly believe you're probably pro-business, but environmentally conscious.
Yeah.
Just judging
Yeah.
by your stuff
Yeah,
at
I don't-
Mount St. Mary's and everything like
Yeah,
that.
I don't see that I think it's a false dichotomy to assume you can't be.
And just to your point of like different things or experiences, I always think back to St. Louis, how they converted a old shoe factory into something called City Museum. And it's a giant like discovery zone for adults and kids at the same time.
Yeah.
And I had a blast, so.
Yeah, I was just, we were up at our granddaughter's field hockey tournament in this funny, spooky nook, Pennsylvania. 5 million square foot abandoned warehouse facility that they turned into this giant sports complex. It was teeming with kids playing all kinds of sports under roof.
Even like, Ohio is converting a like old factory into like a big brewery. You hear a millennial and brewery, they're coming. So
Yes, yeah, that's big.
it's just things like that would help in the county also. So just your background, what is this, NAOP or? is
Yeah,
how you
that's
say
what
it?
you say, NAOP.
Okay, I've
Yeah.
worked for trade associations
Okay.
also. So essentially you're not a lobbyist, but you have lobbyists advocating for essentially corporate real estate, commercial real estate interests.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So on your strength, you said you have a deep knowledge about site selection, corporate real estate development, specifically industrial, office, and mixed use. So just to tie us into Rockville, because everybody's talking about it for quite some time, Deloitte told them the site they picked was adequate. In your eyes, just with your background, do you think that site would be adequate?
Well,
I know I put you on the spot there, so.
I think it has some serious flaws. First of all, as someone else was mentioning, that whole shoestring annexation just really messed up the process and made it difficult for the county to do what it wants to do. So we're stuck with this now. We don't know what we're going to do about it, at least I don't. But No, I don't think it's a good site. First of all, I don't think we were supposed to have heavy industry in the county. I mean, when I look on the zoning, and I looked, and it says, yeah, it qualifies for heavy industry. So it's definitely that. And then the other problem is the topography there is just plain dangerous. So, no, I don't think it was a good site. But I don't know, maybe Deloitte didn't, I don't know what they were looking at. A lot of times those people are only looking at numbers.
Yeah.
And they don't actually come out and kind of breathe the air and take a good look around.
I don't think anybody's going to disagree on the shoestring annexation issue. I mean, the county, I wasn't part of the county commission at that time, but it was basically okay if you followed the issue. And then later on, it got changed at the legislature, but,
Right, I
They
know,
were-
yeah,
so I don't think anybody's going to argue with that
Right.
concept. But
right, so.
That's all I have. Thanks.
Is there anything you'd like to say in closing?
No, I don't think so. I am curious, what is the rest of the process?
Well, actually, we're going to discuss that this evening a little bit. Well, we can't really discuss it because it's not on the agenda, but there will be another a round two. We haven't discussed the whole process yet, but we have discussed there will be a second round of questions we'll make a list. Each of us will pick our top choices. We'll make that list. We'll call those people in for a second interview, and we'll make our selection from the second round of interviews, after the second round of interviews.
Thank you, everybody, for allowing me to come this time around. Last month I was away and I couldn't make it, and I'm really grateful to be given this second opportunity. Thanks.
We're on the motorcycle with her, were you?
No. I have ridden on the back of a motorcycle.
And just, Madam President, one last thing. We need to develop some sort of schedule here, because I feel like we're kind of zigzagging all over the place and at times, so.
Yeah, we will do that. We're going to develop the time schedule and frame and all that, but it's not on the agenda.
I mean, I think you can logistically, you don't have to talk up, I mean, logistics don't have to be on the agenda, but you've already said that you're going to do interviews on March 7th in the evening, I think. Did we say the
I
evening?
think it was in the evening.
Yeah, and so
have
I
it on
thought
my
you were
phone,
each
my
going to give us
calendar.
your list of candidates, and
I think we should do that for the public's benefit, because there are times sitting as a commissioner, I'm trying to figure out where the zigzag's going day after day, so.
Yeah, its interviews, according to my calendar, are at 6 o'clock on the 7th for the second round.
yes.
So we just haven't decided, I don't think I don't know what the numbers are going to be.
We're going to have to, if it's okay with everybody, I think we should probably somewhat discuss this at the end, very lightly, just for some sort of guidance, if that's okay, you think?
It's okay, yeah.
Yeah, I think we need to move it along so all the applicants know what's going on.
Okay, Mr. Trumbull, you're up next. Hi there.
Hi, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Well, tell us, speak into the microphone if you would, please, and tell us, for the record, who you are and why you want to serve on the Development Authority.
My name is Tom Trumbull. I've lived in the county for 20 years, retired here. My wife and I took an 1851 farm and restored it. We were kids, it was always city kids, but there was something about West Virginia that compelled us to come, and we did. As you probably noticed from my resume, I've served on several county boards. And to be honest with you, there's a certain deja vu feeling to this whole mess. For those of you who were here in the early 2000s, we went through a very similar drill with residential development. And I was chair of the Board of Zoning Appeals, and that was really sort of the epicenter of the anger. And so I'm accustomed to dealing with folks who have very strong opinions one way or the other. What I find difficult about this is that despite the emotion that went into that residential development, I never chaired a meeting in which there was an armed bailiff at the door. And there was it 2 Wednesdays ago, I believe it was? I came to that meeting and I was stunned to see an armed man at a door in this county. We went through extremely difficult situations in the year 2000 and that period up to 2008. And yet, I think, more or less, on balance, we maintained a conversation which was adult, which was civilized, and dealt with issues which are equally complex. And so I think, having gone through that, I think that's really what I bring to the table. Rockwell is not the problem. The problem is, A, how we deal with the discussion, the civil discussion, and what are we going to do with the second company that comes to the door? Now, I've spent 20 years in a career in information technology, helped found a small business. We sold it for more than I could ever imagine, which is how I ended up here. I'm going to tell you one thing. We wouldn't come to this county. And I'll tell you why. We didn't have the money to fight about this. Remember, this is overhead. This is not money that goes to producing a product. And so if you come and you say that we're going to have hysterical screaming sessions and I got to produce a lawyer and no, forget it. That's not the way in which you're going to attract the smaller side of businesses. We do not have the money to come here. I'm reminded of a Ralph Lorenzetti, if you can believe that or not, line, in which he was running for, I forgot what the heck he was running for, but I guess it was prosecuting attorney. And someone asked Ralph if he believed in capital punishment. And Ralph said, West Virginia can't afford capital punishment. And I thought that was really a very insightful remark. I actually voted for it. We can't afford to keep going through this. We need to have development which the community supports, which is going to provide the revenue necessary for the infrastructure, not just for the factory or the whatever, but the infrastructure to build the schools and the roads and the rest that's going to support the county. And we need to have jobs that stay here, but not jobs that are going to be in some number of years headed for Mexico. We need to have 21st century jobs. And what I worry about is that perhaps we will take in industry or jobs for the sake of industry and jobs. But I really think what we need to do is come to some county agreement about what we want. I went back and I took a look at the industrial portion of the comprehensive plan. The interesting thing about the comprehensive plan is, by and large, I went through one of them, you say this is a living document, right? We can change it and we can do whatever. Well, as a matter of fact, typically what happens is it goes on the shelf and is more or less ignored anyway. But I took a look at the industrial portion of it. And the industrial portion is platitudes. That's really what it is. Of course we're going to coordinate with the state, and you can read it for yourself. But it's essentially platitudes, except in one important area. It doesn't talk about what others call the openness or the transparency. I called the Development Authority to ask for their rules, the operating rules of the board. Bylaws. I'm sorry, I'm getting old. And they sent them to me. There's nothing in there about what constitutes proprietary information. As far as I can tell, proprietary information is what the business says it is. As a former businessman, I think that's really pretty neat, to be honest with you. And bidding with government contracts, certainly we wanted to keep our overhead rate of salaries and whatever proprietary. But I think this county should have a say in what's proprietary. We know now that sufficient community anger can drive out an Amazon. Apparently, it's perilously close to putting Rockwell on the edge. If we don't come up with a plan to ensure that there is community input, community buy-in to this plan, do you want to fight about it again? I don't think so. So I think the primary problem we face is how are we going to develop procedures that allow for adult, civilized discussions on on very complicated issues? How are we going to ensure that the community feels that the information they need to make an informed choice is available? Now, that's going to have to be a give and take, because as a businessman, for example, I have an overhead rate. I'm not going to tell you that if I can avoid it. Certainly not. I'm not going to tell you the salaries. I'm talking as an IT guy. I don't know how to make cars. But the kinds of information I would consider proprietary, I'll fight tooth and nail with you. But there are other kinds of things that I think we ought to discuss. And I would propose that on a periodic basis, in order to avoid this pitfall, we have community meetings regarding where we want to go with development. Certainly there are people who are very enthusiastic about tourism. I have a small farm. I'd like to keep it as tourism. Sounds good to me. But I also have a suspicion that tourism has to be a part of a mixed economy. I suspect that agriculture needs to play a part in this. I suspect that industry, commercial development needs to play a part in this. And so what I would argue is that one of the first things we should do is think through, and I'm talking about the Development Authority and then coming to you, Development Authority should think through what we absolutely need from these companies to make a judgment, and that we have ways of presenting that to the public which is understandable. I keep trying to remind friends of mine, I've served on several boards in this county. My background is really pretty modest. I'm a political scientist, and we all know they're unemployable. So it seems to me that when presentations are made, they need to be made in ways that are understandable. How many times have you gone through the meetings where you have battling consultants, right? Talking about parts per million and whatever. These decisions need to be based on informed data presented in ways that board members can understand them. Not only are we not typically very technical in these remarks, we're not paid for this, by the way. So I think what we need to do is think very hard about what we're going to do with the next company. Rockwell's not coming back to the Development Authority as I understand it. You all didn't approve it as I understand it. So who's coming next? How are we going to treat them? What are we going to ask them? And how are we going to get the community involved? I think those are the key issues.
Thank you. We have some questions for you
Sure.
now, so I'll start, and then we'll go down the line from my left to my right. And the first question that I have for you has to do, there's a statement in paragraph 15 that is written in the lawsuit that Jefferson County Vision filed with regard to the pilot agreement. And the paragraph 15 states, upon information and belief, all right, let's see if it's going to work. Yeah, it is. Upon information and belief, if Rockwell is permitted to operate at the site, the facility will generate noxious air and water emissions, will produce unsightly sounds, odors, lighting, etc., and will create significant truck traffic to and from the site, all of which will diminish the quality of life and threaten the health and safety of plaintiff and of Jefferson County Vision members and their children. Do you believe that to be a factual statement?
I have friends of long standing on both sides of this issue. And I'm going to have to tell you, the statement alone, I can't judge. I remain frankly open to conversion on this. I do have deep friends in this county, and I have friends who have expertise in this that I don't possess. I meet them in Martin's, and I get an earful on why this thing is really the agent of the devil, okay? And other friends I meet at Mountain View, and they tell me that all of this stuff is malarkey, don't worry about it, you're going to be safe. And I have an interest, because some of you may know I'm about 1.5 miles from this place. I don't know about that yet. I would tell you if I did.
Okay. The next question I have for you has to do with executive sessions, and this is what the lawyer for the JCDA wrote to the Development Authority. It states, "The law recognizes the need of executive sessions to preserve the confidentiality of certain privileged and sensitive topics, including conversations that are attorney-client privileged. To ensure compliance with the law and your legal obligations to the JCDA, all members should refrain from disclosing any confidential information discussed during executive session to any party outside the JCDA." Do you understand? Do you agree with that?
I do. I've had, and you can imagine, serving with the Planning Commission and with the Board of Zoning Appeals, I've attended a few executive sessions in my career.
Yeah, I'm sure you have.
By the way, this becomes, privacy becomes in also regarding financial decisions. It also comes into play when the companies come in with their proprietary information, because they're going to make demands on you to keep that, private. So this whole executive session issue and the degree of privacy that can be reasonably expected from the Development Authority are very, very important issues, and I think some not yet settled.
The next comment also, what I'm going to read comes from another letter from the lawyer to the Development Authority, and it has to do with the fiduciary responsibilities of board members. And this states, "States have recognized that the members of nonprofit boards at a minimum owe a fiduciary duty to the entity they govern, and this fiduciary duty includes a duty of care, loyalty, and a duty of obedience. The duty of care can be rather broad, but at its heart, it's a duty to perform due diligence and to protect the assets of the entity. The duty of loyalty means that the directors must put the interest of the entity above their own personal interests at all times. The duty of obedience means that the directors must ensure that the entity does not engage in illegal or unauthorized activities and fulfills its obligations." Do you understand what that means and what your responsibility would be were you to be appointed? Okay.
I also would point out that I have been president of a nonprofit, as president of the Shepherdstown Rotary, so I have a sense of what the nonprofits are. I'm married to the current president of the Animal Welfare Society, so I should follow. I think something that needs to be considered. First of all, on boards that I've served, we've had insurance, so that if a question came up to sue us over a decision they felt was unlawful, there was coverage there. But I will tell you that when I was chair of these various organizations, when it was clearly a very contentious and complicated issue, I'd have a lawyer in the room. For example, Ms. Grove would be there. And I would ask, what is the range of legal decisions that we can make? My experience is that often the citizens come and expect that we can do miracles, that we're magical. We're an appointed board. We ultimately serve at the pleasure of those who are elected or serve in courts. And so if you come to me and you say, if you approve this development, all the foxes in Jefferson County will be dead. And I've had that said. I said, I like foxes, have them around my place, but if you want the foxes to be preserved, you got to go to the county commission. And so what I hope we would do is dispel this notion of magic in appointed boards, and I would hope the Development Authority, like other boards, would ensure that their decisions in public are referred to the lawyer so we can talk about what is the range of decisions. Now, will I support previous decisions to the extent that they've been already verified by law? Of course I will.
So along those lines, if appointed to the JCDA, you've already stated that you will agree to uphold the contracts and agreements that are currently in place and which were placed in place by board members prior to your appointment.
Assuming that there is no legal challenges to them, of course I will.
And the final question that I have for you is, will you agree to follow the advice of the lawyer even if you don't agree with it?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. And we'll start with Jane.
Well, just basically asking the same question with a little bit different words. Good evening, Mr. Trumbull, and thanks for coming in for the interview. What do you feel is your strongest trait or skill that you would bring to, as a board member, to the JCDA?
Well, as I mentioned before, I think my strongest suit is I've gone through this before. I mean, I've had the dress rehearsal, as it were. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that BZA solved the housing crisis and the carbon market collapse. But I have had the experience of trying to bring an adult, as I said, an adult civilized discussion to very complicated and emotionally laden issues. I think I was reasonably successful at that. Was I perfectly successful? Of course not. But I've been down through this before, and I know how difficult it is.
Okay, thank you.
What kind of development would you like to see in the county?
We need development. I think, first of all, it's got to be development that's supported by the community. We can't keep going through this. I think it needs to be development which leaves as light a footprint on the county as possible so that the other economic pillars of the county, agriculture and tourism, are not adversely affected by the other kinds of development we bring in. And so I think there needs to be some compromises and there needs to be some discussion about how these different sectors of the economy are going to interact with each other. I want to make sure the development we bring in pays for itself. I want to be sure the jobs stay here. I want to be sure that promises made regarding taxes, etc., are met. We all understand that we need commercial development because we need the taxes. We need the jobs too. But how are we going to pay for this infrastructure? Ranson's got an interesting problem. How many hundreds of acres of farmland did Ranson annex with no infrastructure? How are they going to pay for that? As you all know, our school funding is limited by the fact that it's rec state, which means that every county has to more or less have the same amount of resources. But there are ways that we can pump resources in, and we need to examine those so that we build up our school system. If you're going to get IT companies here, you best have a good school system. And so what I want to have is make sure that we have development which complements the other forms of development that we want to have. We want to make sure we have development that pays for itself, and we want to make sure that we have development that doesn't, before you know it, have the jobs go somewhere else.
A little bit of a lighter question. Where were you stationed at in Germany?
I was in Kaiserslautern.
Okay, K-Town. Yeah.
I was with the 3rd Armored Cavalry there.
Okay.
And then I went up to Mannheim, and I was with the 8th Armored Cavalry there. Well, I assume that you're asking out of experience.
Yeah,
right?
I was in Grafenwehr.
Oh, I had many exciting opportunities to excel at Grafenwehr. I was in Graf when the Russians went into Czechoslovakia, as a matter of fact. Yeah. They just shut down our guns immediately. But yeah, I also had my opportunity for Robert McNamara Scholarship, all expenses paid in Southeast Asia. So I paid my dues.
Thank you.
Well, normally I ask about the comprehensive plan, but I think you wear that, don't you, or something like that?
Pardon me?
No, I was just being facetious.
See, I'm not smart enough to pick up.
Like Senator Byrd had of the
Yeah.
Constitution.
What's that?
I said you have a copy in your pocket.
I
like
do.
Senator Byrd
I
had
do.
the
I
Constitution.
my own little private copy.
But what is your view on the comprehensive plan?
The comprehensive plan is produced by sort of the best meaning people in the county. I mean, you've dealt with these folks before. These are citizens that come out at night and go through all of this stuff, and they produce the best plan they think they can. But it needs to be seen as a living document. It's what the county wanted on this particular, voted on, that you decided upon on this particular day. But what you don't know, for the sake of the argument, is that the economy is going to have a significant downturn, or that the development of the county is going to go more towards this direction than it is that direction. What you don't know is whether the housing market's going to collapse. The housing market's not doing well again. So if we look at the comprehensive plan as a living document which can be amended, it needs to be kept in mind because you guys approved it, right? So it's not something that can be just, thrown to the winds. But it's something that we need to look at on a periodic basis, and we don't.
It's been asked, and I assume you could show up for a 3 o'clock meeting on Tuesdays, which is when this board meets.
3 o'clock on Tuesdays, sir.
I think that's when it is. But the question is, I'm sure it used to be a 1 hour meeting. These days, it's longer than that. If you're on the board, how do you deal with an audience of 30 people?
Carefully. I just want to tell you, at 4 o'clock, we feed the horses, so we'll have to. Look, a meeting of 30, here's what I would do, what I did. If you're not careful, what you get are repetitive witnesses. Same person comes in and saves the foxes 10 times. And so what I have suggested is that come together, and if don't say the same thing n number of times, but I will give you more time to say that one thing. And so what I've discovered is, for the sake of the argument, the speaking time's 5 minutes. Okay, I'll give your group 10 minutes, but you only get one person, or 7 minutes, and you only get one person. 30 people in a meeting, there needs to be some way of discriminating to bring it down to a reasonable amount of time. Spending 3 or 4 hours in a meeting is just, it's not acceptable. I'll be honest with you, I missed your first meeting because I'd been in Rockville all day at a business appointment, and I heard you guys are going to be up till midnight. I can't do midnight after a whole day in Rockville. So what I would look for is ways to discriminate. People who agree on we're on one side, people who disagree on the other, come up with a strategy, and I'll give you more time. But it will overall be a reduction in time and a more efficient way of dealing with it.
Just to that point, just being as an elected official, I think we serve at the will of the people. So if I have to stay here for 5 hours and listen to each of their 3 minutes, I think that's what I have to do.
That's what you absolutely have to do. But God allows you the opportunity to just distill that.
I recognize that, but I don't necessarily agree with it.
Okay.
As much as I don't want to sit here for 5 hours, but I'm sure my wife enjoys me being here for extra 5 hours. And you're a straight shooter. I appreciate that. You don't run around the bus at all. So to the pilot agreement, because that constantly comes up, and we are all vying for businesses between states, irrelevant of what business it may be. So we all know West Virginia's tax code needs to be thrown in the trash. It hasn't happened yet, so we're already at a disadvantage competing with surrounding states as it is. Those surrounding states also offer some sort of incentives to corporate America. It's just the fact of the matter in today's world. Look at how much money they just gave Amazon. I recognize those jobs are quite different than other industry. I mean, New York kicked them out anyways. So some element of a pilot agreement or something, unfortunately, seems to be the norm these days. What's your view on pilot agreements? Do you think, what's your general view upon them based upon today's world?
I personally want to be very careful with the kinds of, assume what you're talking about are incentives to come here.
Yeah.
If there's a kind of pay-to-play, what we're saying is a kind of a pay-to-play system here.
Unfortunately, in today's world.
And as a general rule, I'm not real enthusiastic about pay-to-play. On the other hand, we do need to attract businesses here. My point will be that the agreement is that the state will in some way provide a level of financial incentive. But at the same time, that company has to agree that however we work this out, they can't leave until those economic incentives are paid back. We should not be in the job of supporting capitalism. I mean, I'm a capitalist, right? Founded a company. I agree with capitalism. But I do believe that capitalism can't, on the one hand, bitch and moan about regulations, pardon my French, I'm a soldier, and at the same time expect us to subsidize them. That's double dipping. So I agree that the state, county, whoever, can offer economic incentives because we got to compete. But the companies have to assure us the jobs stay here for a certain period of time, and those economic incentives are paid back to the entity that offered them.
That's fair enough. I mean, you've answered a lot of questions. I'll keep it brief then. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. right, the last candidate for this evening is Bob Gillette. Oops. Do roll quickly. Thank you. Good evening, and thank you for being here this evening. Speak into the microphone if you would, please, and tell us your name and why you want to be on the Development Authority.
Okay. I'm Bob Gillette. I'm from Shepherdstown. I have been involved in the previous year's efforts, or if that's what we call them, Rockwell and the various hearings, question and answer periods. And I retired a year ago from a business development position that I held for 30 years. And pretty much focused my entire attention on something I got interested in because of the Rockwell thing, and that was, I had a lot of friends on both sides of the fence. And they were, it was shocking to me, the emotions I saw too. I mean, there was sheer anger, and there was absolute, non-understanding of what those people were thinking about. And I could not put it together in my head at all. How did Jefferson County get in a position where these people who all live in the same geographic area live in the same geographical area? And as I want to do, I've spent a lot of time over the last few months looking at where you all came from in terms of the processes involved, because I had that in my mind. There's something wrong with the process. And I've been through and I've looked at everything from the, excuse me, I have some notes I just want to refer to. The Martinsburg Comprehensive Plan, the Charlestown Plan, the Hagerstown, MOP, whatever that is, the industrial plan up there for the entire region. And the way, and I was particularly interested in, they all talk about land use and zoning and ordinance and all that good stuff. But there's also a small aspect in there that really intrigued me, and that was in the personal, the planning meetings that were ostensibly recommended by the consultants in those plans. I have a suspicion they weren't implemented to the fullest extent possible, because I've never heard of them. But that's where, when things start to develop, the actual citizens that'll be affected are involved either in a physical meeting or internet or whatever you have. And that seems, it seems to me to be something that ought to be looked at, because that seems to be what didn't happen here. And the other thought I had was, well, what's going to happen next time around? And actually, I think it's Trumford was his name? Trumbull. He really he impressed me. My thought here was that I have these ideas in my mind I wanted to come and throw out as an applicant to this JCDA. Worst case, somebody else has experience in exactly that, and you all have those inputs for use in the future. Worst case is, hey, I've got brand new ideas that no one's heard of. I don't think that's the case, but what I'm interested in is getting involved on JCDA from more of a process viewpoint. And just a couple of questions that are in my mind is, how does JCDA involve the local populations, and when does that occur? My thought is, after the decisions have been already made by, say, senior politicians, for example, I think that's too late. There's got to be a better way in that regard. The other part of that is, what happened to the ones that don't come through? Like I read about, let's see, Hagerstown, what was there was a JCDA a couple of years ago had a opportunity to bring industry in here, and they decided to go elsewhere, not to Hagerstown, to Frederick, excuse me. Why? I couldn't find that anywhere. And so it brings a question up: are we looking at lost opportunities to try to improve the process that we have today, so that we don't repeat the same problems in the future? And some of these problems are really long-term solutions, but I think JCDA would really benefit from whatever history they have in terms of, let's make it better next year. There must also, National Geographic, I'm sorry, that was the one that I was referring to. There must be other lessons learned. But I don't see, from just a citizen's viewpoint, it's not obvious to me that those issues ever come out. I mean, I know salary is the big thing, wages, we can't compete with wages. Well, that doesn't mean we shut the door on it. You know, we should, I would hope there would be alternate approaches to maybe making some kind of other incentives just as important. Okay, so what I think I can bring to the JCDA, I have an MBA, and I've spent 30 years with the federal government and the federal procurement system in all aspects of business development, and that includes teaching government people how to procure in terms of going out and asking for RFPs and evaluation criteria, as well as being the person inside the company who has to implement and deliver the goods once they are awarded to the company I'm with. So I'm very comfortable in saying I think I can offer value with that regard. I also have experience in how do you frame your request for, or I'm sorry, how do you take what you know is a hard nut in terms of incentives for companies you want to attract and come up with things that could possibly be of use to them or attract them more than what you have presently. And that's why I'm here.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'll start with the questions, and you've been sitting over there, so you may have heard them, but I'm going to ask you the same ones. So the first one has to do with the Jefferson County Vision lawsuit, the pilot lawsuit against the various county agencies and entities. And the paragraph 15 states the following. Upon information and belief, if Rockwell is permitted to operate at the site, the facility will generate noxious air and water emissions, will produce unsightly sounds, odors, lighting, etc., and will create significant truck traffic to and from the site, all of which will diminish the quality of life and threaten the health and safety of plaintiff and Jefferson County Vision members and their children. Do you want that to be a factual comment, a sentence?
The parts that I have any knowledge of are factual. I'm not a hydrologist or scientist, so I couldn't respond to several of them.
Okay, thank you. The next thing has to do with executive sessions, and it came from the lawyer, a letter that a lawyer wrote to the Jefferson County Development Authority. And it states this. The law recognizes the need of executive sessions to preserve the confidentiality of certain privileged and sensitive topics, including conversations that are attorney-client privileged. To ensure compliance with the law and your legal obligations to the JCDA, all members should refrain from disclosing any confidential information discussed during executive session to any party outside the JCDA. Do you believe that to be a true statement?
Absolutely.
Okay. The next thing has to do with the duties of a fiduciary as a board member, the responsibility of a board member. States have recognized that the members of nonprofit boards at a minimum owe a fiduciary duty to the entity they govern, and this fiduciary duty includes a duty of care, a duty of loyalty, and a duty of obedience. The duty of care can be rather broad, but at its heart, it's a duty to perform due diligence and to protect the assets of the entity. The duty of loyalty means that the directors must put the interests of the entity above their own personal interests at all times. The duty of obedience means that the directors must ensure that the entity does not engage in illegal or unauthorized activities and fulfills its obligations. Do you understand the fiduciary responsibilities of, as stated in that comment?
Yes.
Okay. And question 4. If appointed to the Jefferson County Development Authority, will you agree to uphold the contracts and agreements that are currently in place, which were put in place by board members prior to your appointment?
After reviewing them, yes.
Okay.
I don't know what they are
Okay.
comprehensively.
Yeah, okay. Will you agree to follow the advice of the lawyer for the JCDA even if you don't like it?
Yes.
Okay. That's all I have, and we'll start with Commissioner Tabb.
Well, I've taken a different slant on my question about the JCDA board, and you as a member, what would be your top priority as a new board member? As, you know, this has been a reassembled or reconstituted board.
I would, as I referred to earlier, my first interest would be to take a hard look at the total process of the JCDA and the people both on the upside, in other words, what happens with the people that, the process that's in place to the people that make the guidance for the JCDA, as well as your operational guidance within the JCDA.
What kind of development would you like to see in the county?
I would like I'm open to any kind of development as long as it is honestly put out to the citizens in by some mechanism before it happens.
Thank you.
I've made comment to the chart on the wall, which is the future land use, which is the comprehensive plan. As it's stated several times, it's not a statute, it's not a law, but it is, Mr. Trumbull indicated that at that date, it was the view and wishes of the county. Do you have any view to it?
Just that it sounds like I'm reiterating here, but I'd be very interested in how frequently it gets updated.
There's a statutory update time, but it's 10 years, but it's a plan for that 10-year period, basically.
Okay, I guess what I was getting at was 10 years is a long time. I think you can talk to Martinsburg on their plan, and it went down the tubes because of the drug problems. Has it been updated? I don't know. I'm just saying, you know, your priorities, or the priorities should change by what's actually happening.
I think most of the, you know, I was going to ask about how you would deal with meetings, but I think you've already addressed that, so I'll pass it on here.
It looks like we have another former Montgomery County resident here.
Yeah.
I see a strong correlation from people fleeing Montgomery and Fairfax counties, so.
It's right down there.
Remember, we don't want to be Fairfax County out here, okay? Anyways.
Never
okay, so
lived there.
You're, nothing against Fairfax, they do quite well. But, okay, so you're really worried about or concerned for engagement of the public, which I also am too, and I think more transparency is better as I've pushed for other things at the county commission for the past 2 years. So as far as like larger companies coming into areas, so just give me your opinion on this. So Amazon said they were going to open a new headquarters. Pretend it's not Amazon, pretend it's any other company. But Amazon said they wanted to do another headquarters. So everybody in the country knew that they were going to build another headquarters. So certain areas bid for that, said, we'll come here, we'll give you this, this, and this. So those residents of that area knew there was a chance that Amazon might come to that area. So they didn't essentially enter into any formal agreement with that company, but their residents knew there was a possibility. So before anything was specifically signed or agreed upon, it was more of a proposal to come. So that would give residents a chance to voice their concerns, essentially. So then their government officials could see those concerns and maybe withdraw their proposal. So maybe if corporations could start doing Amazon-type deal, would you think that would suffice? Rather than signing an NDA before you could figure out who the company was, and then before the company made the decision to come, you had to agree to a pilot agreement.
Okay, I think I understand what you're saying.
I'm just trying, yeah, I know it's kind of all over the place, but
I think that's way early for an NDA. Yeah, my first cut is that communication with the residents should be in planning meetings way before that.
I guess because of certain situations with proprietary information is the problem. So the way Amazon structured their decision to build a second headquarters, that was publicly known. They were looking to do that. And areas that potentially wanted to court them made proposals, so their residents knew it was a possibility they could come here. You could say it was anybody. You could say Amazon was IBM or any of these companies. I think that structure is better because the residents know it's a possibility. They can voice their concerns, and potentially the elected officials or whoever can withdraw that proposal based upon that feedback.
You're telling me that's not what happened in this case, in Rockwell case?
It was a different situation. That was not how it was.
Okay, I thought
structured
that's
at all.
why you were throwing it
No, I
out.
was just saying, do you think, in your mind, is that a better way to do things?
Yeah, but I bet there's a better way than that.
Well, it was opinionated thing. I mean, I'm sure there's a better way to do it, most things in life, probably, but,
Yeah. I mean, sure, it's a good place to start.
and that's basically all I have. I know you've been here quite some time, and I'm not going to hold you up.
I like you guys, enlightened women.
I should point out, Bob, you're the third gentleman that's been here whose wife has been an assistant prosecutor.
Oh, yeah, I thought, I didn't want to say anything.
I thought I should point that out. Back in the early days of my career, it's been a while since we worked together.
You know everybody here.
She's solving the mental health problem now.
Well, that's a challenge.
I just have one more question, and I see, do you live inside or outside municipality?
Outside the municipality.
All right, thank you.
Had a long talk with the mayor.
Okay. Thank you. All right, I have nothing further. I don't think, and none of us has anything further. You want to say anything in closing?
I'll do a good job. Just pick the right person, pick the best person.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
That's our goal. Okay, so the process. So I have on my calendar for 6 o'clock, March 7th, as the second round of interviews. So to get to that second round of interviews, we only have a week to, so how many names should we submit? I mean,
I think we talked about 6.
We did
but,
talk about
But I don't know,
6.
we never took a vote on anything.
So, yeah, I mean,
well, we can't vote tonight.
I think there are actually 3 positions. Am I right, Jess? Is it 3? So there are 3 positions that you can appoint. Yeah, excluding the municipalities. So you have, you have municipal members that you have to appoint that have to come from the names that the municipalities have provided you. or not in some cases. However, you have 3 that are, whatever you want to do. And we do have, so Charlestown provided us with 3 names. Only one person interviewed, and they pretty much told us that the other 2 were, just stand-ins, so that they met the statutory requirement. I mean, they basically sent us a letter saying that, so, but, they did give you 3 names. So you interviewed one, the other 2 didn't, yes. We have not received names from Bolivar or Harpers Ferry, though we had the one woman who is from Bolivar, Lori Anderson, who's already interviewed. And I think that those municipalities are looking for people to provide those names to us. But, so if you want to give 3 each, or if you want to double that and give 6, that's up to you, how many names each person wants to give. I'm hoping there'd be some overlap.
Well, I would think there would be.
That we wouldn't
I would
get
think so. I can't imagine that.
30
there wouldn't be,
names,
but, yeah.
30 different names.
Just give 3.
I
Because
think
the chances
if
of
there are
having,
3, if there are 3 appointments that we would make, I would say that we each give 3 our top 3 picks. Yeah.
I'm going to object. I think we had discussed this before, and I thought 6 would give more of a range of people that we'd have the second interviews with. If you're,
Oh, okay, you're right. We're not,
then after
So
that,
you're not nominating people at this point, you're just saying,
No.
who do we want to choose
Right.
for a
see,
second
the
round?
overlap with 6 of each is going to there's probably be a lot of overlap. 3, if we just give 3 each, is going to be less likely, I think. I don't know. I mean, crazier things have happened, so.
Yeah.
I'm up for whatever you want to do. 3 or 6 is fine with me.
In terms of the time frame, so typically you have to remember when we do appointments, we schedule them on Monday before the Thursday meeting. That's what our policy says. I mean, we've kind of drawn this out, but in terms of the time frame, and we talked about this when we scheduled it for March 7th. We said you'd do it on Wednesday, and then you'd have to get us the names by Friday. But, we would contact them on Monday, which would be our normal time frame for notifying applicants that we are going to interview and appoint at the Thursday meeting. So,
well, then, I think I favor going with 6, because that is a short time frame for people, for their schedules and all that. We may have some no-shows,
Yeah, we have had already. Yeah.
so.
Well, why don't we say up to 6?
Yeah, okay.
We may not have 6 people that we
Right,
wanna
right,
nominate.
yeah,
So
that's
let's
right.
say
No
up
more
to
than
6.
6.
No more than
Right.
6, yeah. So up to, no more than 6. We submit those names to Stephanie or Jessica. Jessica.
Jessica, let's just
Send
say
it to Jess.
Okay, so we submit those names to Jessica. She will contact those people, have them come in for a second round interview at 6 o'clock on March 7th, and then we'll go.
6 by
Friday.
Friday.
Yeah. Oh, by Friday.
Is that
Just,
Yes, because Monday, I'll be working on the agenda.
right.
And I'll probably.
Well, you have to contact
Public
them
would
too.
probably want to have things available on Monday.
Okay.
So I guess there are no further applicants then? That's what I was trying to figure out. Like, what's the deal
I
with
think
that?
Stephanie was saying that still technically they could by Monday.
Yeah, I mean, so we've,
But we don't, they can submit, we don't have to consider them,
I
or
would
we
start
can.
forwarding them to the April openings at this point.
Okay.
That's what I would.
That's true,
Yeah.
because there are other
Yeah,
appointments coming up
okay.
in April. All right,
Right.
that's,
Yeah, I think so.
and also, I mean, I know that we're talking in terms of scheduling an interview, but again, our policy does not require the interview. And I know that there are some commissioners who have a strong preference for that, and we always tell people that, but, I mean,
Well, we'll play it by ear. That's all we can do, if the policy is what the policy is, so I think we'll follow the policy.
I mean, you can change that, obviously, I mean,
Yeah,
not
and-
in the
yeah,
middle of the
not
process,
right now,
probably,
we
preferably,
can't,
but,
yeah.
yeah.
So,
unless someone interviews, I won't agree to them, so.
what?
Unless, I won't agree to anybody that
Oh, I
hasn't
know,
interviewed. so.
but that's just you.
That's fine, I know, just for
Yeah.
the record.
And we tell,
Right.
I mean, we tell people, I mean,
Yeah.
we say, there are some commissioners who, if you don't interview, they,
We prefer interviews, but
Right.
they're not required.
Right.
Some commissioners would like to see that happen, although we have appointed without interviews.
Well, when
before.
there's one
There have been
applicant, there's no
exceptions.
quorum. I mean,
So, you know,
mitigating circumstance.
it happens. Okay, so does anyone else have any questions about the process? No? So we need to get our names to Jess by Friday. Okay, great. Up to 6.
And then 6 PM next, March
Next.
7th.
So, yeah, so our regular
The
meeting
day
on March
meeting.
7th is at 9:30, but we have set aside the 6 PM slot to conduct the second round of interviews.
And then how soon will this be appointed, the following meeting?
Probably, I would say, I guess following meeting.
So that
I
would be
could, because, yeah, I'm sure we'll have to.
the 21st
Yeah, the
of March,
21st.
which is an evening meeting too,
Or we could have a special meeting.
or whatever works. But we just need to
We've
figure
had
out
so
some
many
sort
special
of.
meetings, I don't want to have a special
Yeah,
meeting.
it's an evening meeting too, so I
Right.
mean,
It is
Okay.
an evening meeting,
All right.
yeah.
so that seems realistic then, to me at least.
I just feel like the board needs to be operational. That is my
Well, but
thrust.
until we get, even without we may not have the municipality, so it still won't be
So we
operational.
have no Shepherd's
Well,
Head.
that's a matter of, that
You
I
have
want to put on the
no-
agenda next
You have no
meeting,
Shepherd's-
because I think they could be operational.
Well, okay, we'll have to discuss that.
And I actually requested in that memo that you were having a draft that would be available to the public. I requested that he address that actual question. So he should, on March 7th, have that memo ready for you to discuss as to whether or not they can meet without those statutory members.
Good. Anything else? If there's nothing further, we're adjourned.